Attendance is open, guys. So we have to pick some programs today. I think you guys had already picked certain programs in the previous week that you would like to discuss. So uh, I just wanted that both the batches pick up different programs, so that when the recording is done, you can actually have a look at some other code, in both batches. So what exactly is the plan? You can suggest some programs that we can look into. Today and tomorrow, this is basically problem discussion. Um, we can either discuss a new problem. What I had in my mind was that when I was creating the syllabus, I had in my mind that we'll discuss things like sorting and searching. But then throughout the course, I have already provided you guys with examples of searching and sorting and linked lists and all those things. So we do have two lectures which we can use for, as some of you have already said, right, that sometimes you have issues with following a particular example, code example, right? So if you guys want, we can do that today, and you can come up with any particular program that you feel you were not able to understand. And okay, so stop clock is one. Let us have this one in my mind. Um, by the way, the attendance is open, guys, so please mark it. So stop clock example is one example. Any other uh, probable examples? We'll start with it, but any other probable examples? I think I remember at least two. Uh, oh, you got it. You got the poll thing fixed. What exactly was the issue?
So there's this tab on like just on desktop version. We need to enable the tab of the polls, then you can create a poll.
Okay, so okay, towards the end we can probably so I did talk to my friend Avinish. So he's actually he also prefers if we keep it the next weekend. So I said fine, we'll we'll welcome you the next weekend. So sometime either on Saturday or Sunday in the next time, not the coming weekend, but in the next weekend. Please pick up some time, guys, when you would like, because I understand you have your club activities scheduled during the weekend. So I don't want to intrude in the spaces of your clubs. But some 1 hour time, and as I said, it is a voluntary thing. It's not something that I'm forcing upon you. So only those people who would like to attend his lecture can give their opinion, and we'll schedule it. What is the next weekend then? Today is 23rd. Let me just check out the. So that will be 20. Okay, that is this weekend. It will be what? Cal March 2021. By the way, if you guys use Linux, there is a utility called Cal on terminal with which you can see the calendar. Okay, so it's basically 6th or 7th of March. Okay, so uh, we would like to have it on either 6th or 7th. So if towards the end of the lecture we can have a poll, I'll ask someone in the other batch to just create that poll and tell us. But the idea is either 6th or 7th, and then some time on these days. Okay, let's then go back to the point. How many people? 55 responses I have, and yeah. So please mark your attendance. We are going to start now. One thing that we'll discuss is, of course, the stop clock program. Anything else that you guys have in your mind? Divya, do you remember which week it was? I sometimes forget. Uh,
So week 7.
week 7. Okay, I'll open that. Any other program? Because actually, once I shift to my virtual machine, I cannot see the chats. So I'll have to switch back to the thing, this thing. So any other program that you would like to discuss other than the stop clock thing? I remember at least two programs each coming from both batches, two different programs that is. Um, I don't remember which was the other program. Okay, so then we'll start with the stop clock thing and think about it. If there is any other program that we should discuss in the class, then we'll do that. But let us start with that. So let me share my screen. Linked list. Acha. Okay, so we'll start. The second stop clock one is shorter program. So we'll start with that and then we'll move to linked list. Car sorter. Okay. Uh, yeah. Let us start with the stop clock thing and then we'll start. Okay. Can you guys see my virtual machine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And can you also see my cursor? Like the mouse pointer?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So let's start. So it is in week 7, as Divya said. Sorry, here. Stop clock. Okay. Okay, guys. So whenever you start reading the code, usually the best way to do that is by. Okay, let me just get this software update away. Usually the best place to start is from main, right? Because this is exactly how your code gets executed. Okay. So I have this habit. Some people have a different habit. They actually start reading it from the top, but I don't do that. So this is kind of an optimization that I will only. It's kind of a lazy evaluation thing that I will only read a code when it is required. So basically, let us start from here. So I'm declaring a double variable time, a long variable CTR. This is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So it is 10 to the power 6. So it says, let me print something first, yawn, click. Now, what is happening here? I'm calling a function called click. Let's go to click. So for this particular example, we have used a particular data type. Okay, I'm pretty sure it will be a structure, but from here we cannot know because clock underscore t is written like this. So there is a very good chance that if you open up time.h, it will be some kind of a type def thing defined there, right? So there is a good chance that it is probably a structure, but we don't really care what it is. Okay, so as long as you know what type you are declaring, you don't really care the exact details of it. So this is something that you will see in C and C++ very often, that a particular library will have certain new data types there, and there will be some functions where these data types can actually be passed or returned. So here we are going to use a particular function called clock. This function is declared. Okay, the prototype is in time.h. And by the way, I cannot see your chats right now, so if you have a query, you'll have to unmute and ask. Okay, so there is a function called clock. So let us just check what clock does. Just So what does the clock function does? The clock function returns an approximation of processor time used by the program. Okay, the value returned is the CPU time used so far as a clock t. So clock t is basically that data type that we have just seen, right? To get the number of seconds used divided by clocks per second. Okay, so now what is this clocks per second? You don't have to worry much, but the idea is something like this. When you study this computer organization, you will come to know that there is something known as a clock speed of each processor. Okay, you guys may have heard this term, right? My processor is these many gigahertz. Okay, these many gigahertz, as in some 2.5 gigahertz, 3 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz. I mean, I'm not sure what is the exact current state of the art, but some gigahertz, right? And gigahertz, if you guys may have studied that in physics, I guess, right? Hertz is essentially the reverse of time, right? In the dimensionality analysis, you would have read it is t to the power 1 minus 1, t to the power minus 1. So basically, whenever you see something like hertz, it means that these are the number of cycles that your CPU has per second. Okay, the higher is the number, the faster is your processor. That is the idea. So what clock t actually returns is the number of CPU cycles. If you want to figure out the number of seconds, you have to divide it by this. This is the idea. Okay, so but the idea is what it returns is that approximately at let us say your program starts at time t, and currently it is time t dash. It will basically return you the delta t dash minus t. That is what it will return. So this can give you an idea of for exactly how much amount of time your program has currently executed. So let us go back here. So what am I doing here? The first thing that I have done is that I have created a static variable, and it's called prior. Okay, now there is one property of static variables, that they are always initialized by 0. Okay, this is different from the auto variables that we use. Auto variables are initialized with some kind of a random value, some garbage value, but static variables are always initialized by 0. So essentially what we are going to do in this particular program is, let us say I called this click function once. What I'm going to do is I'm going to record this value of clock. Okay, so what when the first call to click happens, what exactly will clock return? It will return roughly the number of cycles which has elapsed since this program started executing, right? So this now variable essentially has that value, okay, t dash minus t, okay, the delta between t dash and t is now stored into now. And because prior, right, it will be initialized with a 0. um, if I want to find the if I find this difference between now and prior, this difference is essentially the amount of time that this program has already executed now. Okay, so this is the overall idea, that a difference between now and prior will give you the difference between the last call to click and the current call to click. So you can see that here I'm calling click at least twice, right? Yeah, I'm calling it thrice. So this is what is happening. In fact, I guess more times, here. The idea is I just want to figure out the difference between two consecutive calls to click, right? So here what I am doing is, let me print something first, yawn, click, then I am doing this while ctr minus minus. So essentially this is a loop which will take some amount, right, some amount of time, because I'm basically counting down from 10 to the power 6 to 0. Okay, when will this while ctr minus minus thing, it when will this loop break out? When will this condition be false? When ctr becomes 0, right? At that point of time this loop will break out. So essentially this is a kind of a delay loop. Such kind of loops are also known as delay loops. Here I'm not really doing anything substantial. I'm just wasting some cpu cycles so that it takes up some time. So what I'm doing is I'm just calling click once, I'm wasting some time here, and then I'm calling click again. Okay, so now this time value that I get, and this click function, it returns the difference between prior and now. This is what it returns, right? Of course I have to divide it by the number of clocks, right, as the man page for clock told me. So I'm basically giving you back the difference, and at the same time what I'm doing is I am assigning prior the new value. Why? So it's something like this. Let me open up a how should I? So here only let me add. Assume that we are having a timeline. Okay, timeline. So what is it? It is something like this. Something like this. And here, this is t0. This is t1. These are all instances of time. This is t2. This is t3, right? So what I am trying to find out is every time I want to know what is the difference between t1 and t2. So basically, this is the idea of creating this function. Click returns t1 minus t0 or t2 minus t1, sorry, this capital, or t3 minus t2. Basically it returns ti minus ti minus 1. Okay, so this is what the idea is, that I need to figure out this point of time. Okay, there has to be some offset. So let us say this offset here t0 is 0, right? Then and t1 is 10, so it means that my program has run currently for 10 seconds. Of course the unit is really bad, let me use it something like milliseconds. So if t0 is 0 and t1 is 10, I'm currently saying that my program has executed for 10 milliseconds. Then if t2 is 25, I'll say that since the last call to click, which was at 10 milliseconds after my program started, 15 more milliseconds have elapsed, something like this. Then if t3 is 45, I would say since the last call to click, 20 more milliseconds have elapsed. So basically what I want at each step, I want a previous value, the previous call to click, at what point of time in the timeline did it happen, that I need to store somewhere, and then I get the current clock time here, and then I find the difference. So for doing that, I'm using a static variable. And the idea here is static variables, they actually retain the last value, the value that was changed in the previous call to that function, that remains intact. So using a static variable, I can actually keep the immediately previous values of clock, and then I can get the new value of the clock and find the difference between them. So this is the whole program. Okay, this is what this whole program is doing. Now if I actually uncomment this line, you will actually get to know.
So actually, in here we are using static variable. So if we use a global variable clock t
Hmm.
and define it above click function, so
Hmm.
it will work this. It
Yeah,
will do the same work, no?
it will do the same thing. It will have the same effect. I just wanted to show you guys an example of static variables. The advantage here is that because this prior variable only makes sense with respect to click, right? What exactly prior means? That the prior call to click happened at this particular time, right? So essentially, if I make it a global variable, it could be confusing as in, because first of all, this prior will be available for all the functions to be modified, which I probably do not want. I want it to be associated just with the click function. So static variables pretty much behave like the global variables only. It's just that they are only accessible to the function in which they were created. Is it Does it
Okay.
make sense?
Yes. Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, so any other queries?
Sir, sir,
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
sir, why are we using two times the click function in main, the click and then time equals to click? So can you explain this thing?
So this is basically what. Let me just run it. Okay. So this is what is happening. At the beginning, 0 comma 873. So this means that in the first call to click, the value of prior was 0 and the value of now was 873. In the next call to click, the value of prior was 873 and this one. So basically, between this and this, we had that loop. Okay, that long loop, right, which was basically counting down from 10 to the power 6 to 0. So roughly the amount of time that particular loop took was something like this much, right? Now I'm doing the same thing again. You can see that there are differences in the number of in the amount of time the same loop takes, okay, the second time and the first time. It's because of the scheduling, right? I had put a digression lecture where I talked about what is time sharing. I'm not sure how many of you have watched it, but the idea is, if you have a single CPU, there is a kind of context switching. So one particular process is given some time to execute, then that time is taken away, so the process is suspended. Then the process again after some time gets some more time. This is happening at a very fast rate, right? I mean, I'm talking about uh, microseconds or milliseconds of scale. So you feel like as if the process is executing in continuity, but it is not. So this is the idea, that for the first time when I ran that loop, all I wanted to figure out is for how much amount of time this loop is running. This was the core idea, that how much time did this loop take. So in the first occasion, the value of prior was 873, and then the next value is 3847. So now if you go back to this code, this is what I'm doing. I called the function click once, so it will assign certain values to prior, right? Prior means that uh, what you can see at the end of the function, I'm just doing prior equal to now. So in this timeline thing, this is what is happening, right? Ti becomes Ti plus 1, after each iteration. That is the idea. So the same thing is prior equals now means that now my cursor has moved from T0 to T1, or T1 to T2, or T2 to T3. That is the idea. Every time I'm moving forward in the time space. And this is what these three lines are doing. Click, then the loop, and then click again. So essentially I'm just trying to find out how much time it took to execute this loop, and then I print it here. Just a minute.
Okay, sir, got it.
Yeah, and the same thing I do it again, exactly the same thing. Click, the loop again, and then click. Okay, this is a very simple program. The only thing that I'm trying to show here is how static variables can be used. That is it. Now if you guys have any queries, you can ask. Let me in fact go back to chats. Okay, there is something. Process management. Okay, so you guys know, you guys understand what is process scheduling, is it? If you guys know, then it's great. So basically, this is what this particular program is showing, that the same code might take different amount of time to execute because of process scheduling. um, Sometimes you might see that the second loop was faster as compared to the first loop. Sometimes the first loop is faster as compared to the second loop. Sometimes they might actually be of similar of similar amount of time, something like this. But the idea is something like this. And any questions on this? This was actually a very simple program just to show you how static variables worked. It's just that I used an example where I had to explain clocks and processes to you. But the idea is that the prior variable, you can see that it can hold its prior value when the function was called. Whatever values I assigned to it, that values actually persist. That is the only idea. So any queries on that? Otherwise, we'll move to the car sorter program. Okay, so Jay, do you remember what week it was? Car sorter?
Sir, week 8.
Week 8. Okay, so let me check it. Car sorter.c. Oh, sorry, cars sorter. Okay, so first thing that it has a structure which is defined in car.s. So let us start from there. We could actually come back, but let us start from there. It's easier. So this is a structure. We have called it passenger vehicle. It has three member variables: name, capacity, and price in lakhs. Okay, so this is a simple thing. This is a 30 character array. This is an integer, and this is a float. I think this is clear, right? There is nothing to discuss here. Now, we also discussed this. Why do we have this quotes instead of this less than and greater than sign, right? You remember? So basically, the reason is that um, this notation means that please look for the header file in the current directory, and this notation means that please look for this header file in a specially designated include directory. Okay, that specially designated include directory is defined, let us say predefined. Okay, you don't have to worry about it. But this means, if something is in quotes, it means please find this please try to find this header file in the current directory. Okay, so then this is a type def statement. If you remember what two type def statements do, basically with the help of type def statements, whatever is the last token in this whole uh, line. You can say the last token becomes an alias for everything between type def and the last token. So basically, car becomes an alias for writing struct passenger vehicle. So wherever you were writing struct passenger vehicle, you can simply replace that with car now. It works. So that is the idea of type def statement. There are three function declarations. We'll get to them as required, but let us come to main directly. So here cars 3, right? So again, it could have been struct passenger vehicle here. I could have written struct passenger vehicle instead of car, and it would have had the same effect. It is just an alias. So this is creating an array of size 3 for cars. um, yeah, there was some changes also in this code, right? I forgot. uh, I think Nehal had asked me. In fact, let me just copy it from Google Drive. I think I made the changes directly on Google Drive. It was this particular program, right, Nehal? I forgot to change it in my code base.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This one only.
Yeah, just a minute. I'll just copy the code from there. I think there was some /0 issue or something like that.
Yes, sir. We weren't checking the end of the string in
Yes, I got it. So let
in
me
the
just,
last while statement.
I think there's just one statement change, so I'll just copy it from there and put it here. Okay, I don't think I made a change. So let's cover this. I know I'll tell you where the changes. Will probably make the change in this live lecture itself. Okay. So we'll come to this. So this is the idea. I have an array of these structure variables. Okay, so each member of the cars array is basically one structure variable. Okay, and now, so essentially cars 0 means one structure variable, cars 1 means another structure variable, and cars 2 means another structure variable. And how do we access a particular member of a structure variable? Using the dot operator and the name of the member variable. So cars 0 dot name means the name array for cars 0. Cars 0 dot capacity means capacity member variable for cars 0. And similarly, price in lakhs, cars 0 dot price in lakhs means the price in lakhs member variable for the first structure variable in this array. So these three lines you can understand, basically it is assigning the values to all of the member variables for um, all the three structure variables of this particular array. Then I'm making a call to the sort function. So let's go to sort. So in sort function, what exactly am I doing? So for this you need to understand what there are many ways to sort arrays. Did we discuss bubble sort in the class? We did discuss some sort, right? I forget. um, so so for now, just, yeah, did we discuss any sorting in the class, right? Bubble sort, insertion sort. uh, I think we probably discussed insertion sort, if I'm not wrong. Um, bubble sort is another sort, guys. Bubble sort, insertion sort, and selection sort. You will study all these things in data structures. Basically, there are different ways to sort a group of numbers. Okay, an array of numbers. I'll just explain to you what bubble sort is in very simple words. So let us say you have an array and you want to sort it. What you do is you basically start from the first index, okay, from the left, and then you say that wherever there are values which are out of order, okay, you just have a look at two values at a time. Okay, um, the current value and the value just next to that value, and you see if these two values are out of order as in I'm trying to sort the array in ascending order. So the proper term is actually non-decreasing order, because there might be duplicates. Okay, but for the simplicity, if there are no duplicates in the array, we are trying to sort it in ascending order. So wherever you see that arri is actually greater than arri plus 1, That means that a smaller number appears appears after a greater number. Then you simply swap them as in you make ARR I as ARR I plus 1 and ARR I plus 1 as ARR I. Okay, and there is a, if you do it n minus 1 times, okay, then your array will become sorted. So if you do this whole thing from beginning to the end for n minus 1 times, considering your array size is n, then your complete array will be sorted. So this is if you want to if you still cannot understand it, just type bubble sort on Google and check. There are some very nice visualizations that you can see, so you can see what happens in each iteration. But the overall idea of a bubble sort is you basically keep on swapping elements wherever you find them out of order, and after a certain number of iterations your array will be sorted. So up to here, okay, um, in fact the actual algorithm is exactly the same. There is no change in the algorithm. It's just that instead of sorting numbers, we have to sort structure variables. Okay, so this is a slightly challenging task, right? How do you sort structure variables? So the first thing you will have to do whenever you are, and this is not just applicable for structure variables, you may have to do this for objects in C++ as well. Okay, so how do we sort objects or structure variables? The first thing we have to do is we have to define some kind of ordering. In mathematics, have you guys read about partial ordering and uh, things like partial ordering or full ordering, something like this? Have you guys studied? Uh, okay, fine. So the idea is something like this. You may study something like this in discrete mathematics. You might have a subject on this, right? So there you can study what is a partial ordering and what is a total ordering. So you actually have to define a total ordering on this structure. Okay, maybe ask this question to Indra ma'am, what is total ordering and partial ordering? She'll tell you. But basically you have to define a total ordering on your structures. And what I mean is, if I give you any two structure variables, you should be able to tell me that whether A is less than B, A is greater than B, or A equals B. Okay, so and this total and partial ordering is very important because when you actually start doing coding, there will be many times when you'll actually have to define this ordering. Okay, so let us come back to our example. How do we define this ordering? There is this function called compare. So this compare function is essentially putting a total ordering on these structure variables. So what it says is, if you give me two instances of structure variable of this structure passenger vehicle, C1 and C2, this compare function will always return an integer. This integer is 0 if C1 equals C2. This integer is less than 0 if C1 is less than C2, and this integer is greater than 0 if C1 is greater than C2. Okay, now exactly what do you write in this function, that depends on you. It depends on how you define two structures to be comparable, right? So in this particular case, the example we are taking is that I am going to ignore the values of two member variables, price in lakhs and capacity. I'm only because I'm trying to sort the structure variables by their name, right? So I don't care what are the values of price in lakhs and capacity. So I'm just going to sort them using their name member variables. So whatever code you see here, okay, from here there is a, I have to actually check up what I probably have to add some conditions here, but let me start from the beginning. So what does the compare function do? It has two structure variables, C1 and C2. Here what I'm trying to do is, let us say, you can see, um, when I define these names, there are both uh, lowercase characters and uppercase characters. So I want this comparison to be case insensitive. right? So because you understand that in ASCII, capital T has a different ASCII code as compared to small t, right? So if I try to compare two strings in C, um, the problem is the same string in lowercase and the same string in uppercase, they are two different strings. Okay, so basically the first loop here is just converting the past parameters name member variable to the to a lower case. So this Toyota here, right, Hyundai or whatever, Toyota, it will become something like this. Let me just type it here. After the first loop runs, this becomes Toyota Innova Vista. This is what this particular string becomes. Sorry, Toyota. And I want to compare this, let us say, with this string, Hyundai Creta. This is what I want. So I want to compare these two strings, and there is something known as lexicographic order. So what it means is I'm trying to compare um, which string is greater than or smaller than the other string. So the concept of lexicographic order is that if a particular string, let us assume that both these strings are going to be part of a dictionary. If a particular string appears before the other string, it is lexicographically smaller than the other string, right? So this means everything that starts with A will be lesser in comparison to everything that starts with B, which in turn will be lesser than everything that starts with C, so on and so forth. Now, if the first character of the two strings are common, then you check the second character. So everything that starts with A is lesser than everything that starts with AB, which in turn is lesser than everything that starts with AC, so on and so forth. So this is how you actually compare two strings and declare one of them to be smaller and one of them to be greater. That is the idea. So now let us come to the compare function. Both these loops, the first loop, what is it doing? It is starting from actually 0. So because I have given I as -1, when I do plus plus I, it means that I will first be incremented and then it will be used. So you can in theory assume this is something like this: C1 dot name 0 for the first time is not equal to the /0 character. It is basically just assigning, reassigning everything to the lowercase form of that particular character. Okay. So at the end of this loop, C1 dot name, whatever name it has, it will now be changed to its lowercase equivalent. Similarly for C2, okay, it will be changed to its lowercase uh, equivalent. Now this loop, what is the idea? That if these two strings will actually be equal to each other if all the characters are exactly the same. Okay, now the problem here is, and whenever there is a change in the character starting from the beginning, I will just compare that character. So let me write it something like this. Let us say I want to compare ABC with ABD. Okay, so when this loop starts first time on for the first character, um, 0 and 0, they are both same. Why? Because A equals A. So I'll say, okay, now let's look at the next character. Then we move to B. Okay, B equals B. They are both same again. Then I move ahead. I say C equals, so this at this point of time, this particular condition will become false. Okay, so I'll come out of the loop and I'll be here. And what do? I basically say just return C minus D. This is the idea. Okay, and what will be the output of C minus D? Because C is smaller than D in the ASCII range, this number will be a negative number. Instead, if I was comparing ABF with, let us say, ABE, then F minus E, okay, what will it return? It will return a positive number. Why? Because F comes after E. So this is a kind of a trick. Okay, what trick am I trying to use here? First, I basically keep on ignoring the characters in the two strings until they are equal to each other. At the point that they are different, I just find the difference in their ASCII values and return it back. Okay? So this is a trick. What trick am I doing here? Basically, if and this is where the problem with this code is that I have not put a check for the case where both these strings are exactly the same. So if I try to compare ABC with ABC, this is kind of a never ending loop, because it will I have to put a check for /0. This is what Nehal pointed out. So I have to put something like this: if C1 I is not equal to /0 and C2 I is not equal to /0, only then this comparison actually makes sense. Like this. Actually, I don't need this. I can simply say %. So this is the proper way to do it. Okay. This condition I had missed. This is what Nehal pointed out. Okay, so any doubts on this function? What exactly is this function doing? And do you understand what exactly will this function return? If you have a doubt on this, please ask now.
Sir,
Let me also revise it. The first loop is just changing the string, the name of my car, to the lowercase. That is the first loop, or that is the job of the first loop. The second loop is doing the same for the name of my second car. In the third loop, the idea is something like this. um, I can declare two strings to be lexicographically equal to each other if all their characters are exactly the same. Okay, in which case, when will this particular loop end? When this condition becomes false. C1 is not equal to 0, or so either of these two conditions will actually become false, and I'll come out of this loop, and this will return 0 minus 0. 0 as in the ASCII code of /0 character is 0. So I'm basically trying to return 0 minus 0 from here, which will be 0, and it means that these two strings, C1 dot name and C2 dot name, actually this is wrong, this will be C1 dot name dot name dot name. So in which case it will return a 0. If it is something like this, ABC versus ABD, then this loop will run two times, right? Because A equals A and B equals B, but in the third time C does not equal C is not equal to D. So then I'll come out of this loop, and what will I return? C minus D, C in ASCII code minus D in ASCII code, and that number will be a negative number. So this compare function actually returns me a negative number. And if it is something like this, F, ABF and ABE, then this last statement returns F minus E, again in ASCII codes, and this will be a positive number. So now if you don't understand any part of this code, please ask. Okay, let me check out the chat. So yeah, any queries? If you understand this, we'll move ahead, because this is basically the crux of this code, the sorting code. It is only the comparison, I think, that may have been difficult for you to understand. So this is exactly how we are comparing two structure variables. Is it clear? Okay, so then if this part is clear, the only other concept that this code has is this, that here I am passing C1 and C2 by value. So essentially the when I call it like this here, copies of cars j and cars j plus 1 will be created locally in the compare function. So whatever changes I am doing to the string using these two loops, the side effects are not going to be shown in the main function. The original cars array, it remains as it is. There is no effect on the cars array, because these two variables c1 and c2 are just copies of these two car variables, so there is no effect on them. And this is another concept, right? That this is passing structure variable by value. But when I want to swap these two, right? And when will I want to swap? Of course, bubble sort tells me that whenever there is a mismatch in the order, you simply swap the consecutive values. So that is what I am going to do. I am going to, if I find that compare is greater than 0, the value that compare function has returned is greater than 0, what does it mean? It means that cars j is greater than cars j plus 1. Or when I say greater than, it means it is the name of cars j is lexicographically greater than the name of cars j plus 1. So in this case, I am basically saying just swap these two cars. And here, because I want the changes to be reflected in my array, I am passing them by reference. Okay, so here you can see in swap, this is passed by reference. Okay, I'm using pointers here. So this is simple pass by reference. If you remember the swapping program, that is exactly what we did in the swapping program. There was a temp variable, and that temp variable will store the value of one of the variables, and then you assign it to the other, and so on and so forth. So the same three statements with the help of which you swap stuff, the same three things are happening here. Okay. So this is the overall, and yeah, um, another concept, of course, is that arrays are always passed by reference. So in the main, here when you do sort cars, the array is being passed by reference. So whatever changes this sort function does to this array, cars array, it will be reflected back in the main. So this is why when you run this code, you will see that these three structure variables are now in the order, they are alphabetically arranged. So I think this Hyundai Creta will be the first in the list, this Kia Saltos will be the second, and Toyota Innova will be the third. Any questions on this? So you guys understand what is happening? No queries? Okay, there is something in the chat. Just a minute. Okay, so this is the idea, guys. The only thing you needed to know is something like this. And is there a question? No. So I think the linked list program is bigger, so we can start with the linked list program tomorrow, I guess, because we won't be able to finish. What we can do as this time is we can have a quiz for you guys. It will take only 8 minutes of your time, so let's do that. I had to do it someday, so we have enough time. I'll just maybe borrow 2 minutes from the next class. Please say sorry to the person who's going to take the next class. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to put the link of your quiz on the chat. You can open it up. I haven't yet opened the responses. I will open it in about at 9:56. You have to submit it by 10:03. You'll get one more extra minute up to 10:04 for late submission. So there will be some penalty for late submission, but you have to submit it by 10:03. I will open it up at 9:56. Please keep it ready in your Chrome tabs. At 9:56 I will open the responses, and you should see the questions. Okay. uh, just a minute. Actually, I'm just opening it right now. You can take up to 10.03.
सर टाइम कितने बजे तक है?
10:03 and one
10:03.
more minute extra with late submission.
Sir, those who have done can leave the meeting.
Yes, you can, and please apologize on my behalf to the next professor. One more minute, guys. So around 30 more seconds or so. Okay, I'll switch it off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, switching it off. Okay, so I've got 76 responses, okay, and 98 attendances in the class. I think uh, uh, the, the attendance at the time when I started the quiz was around 65 or so. So you can see that this was the idea, right? I mean, just wanted to surprise you guys. Okay, you can move ahead to the next class. We'll chat tomorrow. Okay, bye guys.